What's this? Sanctuary? Yes. Is it not like several months late? Also, yes. But during the ExileCon, they announced that Sanctuary would be back for 3.22 and gave us a trailer for Trial of the Ancestors as well. So I think it's the perfect moment to make a little showcase of an interesting build I tried then. A Golem Bomber build. I like explosions, and for Sanctuary, it felt like the perfect occasion to try it out considering the mechanics. And I think it would also be a solid choice for 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors, but we haven't seen a patch notes yet, so keep that in mind. Check it out! So back in Sanctuary, I decided to play this build for one major reason. It's a damage over time build, which means that you can do your damage only once in a while and focus on dodging it. Also, it's minion based, so you also don't need to aim anything or target anything because the minion does it for you. And it can hit from afar or over a corner, and minion also provides something to pull aggro instead of yourself. Perfect for Sanctuary, right? Let me give you a brief rundown of what this build is. It's centered around Maw of Mischief, which is an helmet that grants you the skill Death Wish. Death Wish allows you to channel, and at the end of the channel, explode your minions for a flat damage plus a percentage of the minion's maximum life, and then another plus 10% more damage per sacrificed minion during the channel, up to 130%, so 30 minions. So we use Stone Golem because of their insane base life stat and buff stat. And because summoning golems all the time is annoying, we are using Elementalist's Primordial of the Liege to automatically resummon them for us. I'll show you my build, but take note that it's really not that optimized, but it's still more than enough to clear the game. I want to give you the PoB numbers, which are decent, but I can tell you that the numbers given are not accurate. And the given number are probably way below what they should be. It's actually easy to prove it by simply toggling on and off our gem that modify our golem's life and see that our DPS doesn't change. But it should, since our base damage is a percentage of the max life of the minion sacrificed. It seems to calculate off a base of about 4k fire damage instead of something closer to 23k fire damage given my numbers. But I'm not too sure about the real actual numbers, so take this with a grain of salt. That being said, PoB gives us about 200k Ignite Boss DPS with a 1 tap and no buffs up, and a little over a million Ignite Boss DPS fully channeled and with buffs. Buffs all being applied in a singular click. That's the single target, and it's a bit on the low side because we sacrifice a lot of the DPS to ensure we have at least a decent clear as well. It's not the fastest mapper out there, but I do feel like it hit a balance between bossing, defense, and clear. You could improve in all areas with more crunchy, as you always can in PoE, but back then it was pretty budget, but I'll come back to this. Well, the obvious big issue here was that it doesn't really provide much of any clear, especially considering that we are using just a handful of golems with 4-second respawn timer on them. The answer is explosion. It's always explosion. And I'm not talking about us exploding our golems, but rather the extremely powerful combo of Shaper of Flames, Obliteration, and Fan the Flames. This combo is just generally super strong for clear, and it's one of my favorite things in PoE, if I'm being honest. Clear-wise, I feel like it's top tier, but it all boils down to how you trigger this. Let me break it down for you. Shaper of Flame allows all our hits to always ignite, meaning any kind of damage can now ignite. Obliteration has 20% chance to make the enemies explode in death, or 25% of their maximum life as chaos damage. And finally, Fan the Flame is just a generic ignite you inflict spread to other enemies within a radius of 15. Together, this means that anytime you kill an enemy, it might explode for massive base damage, which then ignites, and then spreads, which might kill other enemies, which might explode, so on and so forth, in a big daisy chain of explosions. This very potent combo that will carry your clear by itself, and it only gets better with more enemies on the screen. All you need is to kill a couple of enemies to start the change, and a quick one tap of Death Wish will explode a golem, and that should already be enough to wipe the screen and would leave only highly resistant enemies around, if even that. Also, with Fan the Flames, the corpse still spread ignites, which means that you can practically idle certain game mechanics like Delve, Ritual, Ultimatum, or Blight, since you will always have fresh corpses at the spawning point. That will keep the chain going mostly by itself. Also, the golems will go attack enemies since they are aggressive due to Maw of Mischief, so it's like an Omega missile basically. The only catch with this combo is that you have to use Obliteration, which does cut a lot out of your DPS, since it doesn't provide otherwise useful stats. An option is to weapon switch, but I didn't want to deal with that, so I felt like I wouldn't do it and that my DPS was sufficient anyway with using Obliteration still. Another downside of the build is that it's a bit awkward to play and it's a bit delayed, so you need to explode a golem, which is kinda hard to target the right one. That needs to be near enemies that also have only 20% chance of exploding, and hopefully enemies are close enough to each other to chain. And well, if you go too fast, you might not have any golems to explode, or if you got unlucky, you might have to wait for golems to res, or you will need to use Convocation to bring them near enemies. That being said, a lot of this is fixed by having more minions by using Herald of Purity. While there might be downsides to this build, I still think it's pretty solid. It sits at about 5k life, 700 ES, and 13k armor, and that's post-nerf. 68% block and 75 spell block, albeit with cleansing blows, but with a shield that recover percent life on block, and a fairly sizable regen as well. Plus, having minions also means that they often are taking the aggro for you instead, which is just inherently more safe. Now, some things have changed a bit since I made a build. Back then, in the good old times, Skin of the Lord was one of the cheapest 6-link out there, and probably absolutely best in slot in this build. Now, it's not like you can't buy it anymore, it's just that it's like 20 times more expensive or something. The build makes great use of it, as we scale our damage with our golem's lives mostly. And if we throw our Corrupted Stone Golem, Empower, and Enhance in there, we can get the 21-0 Golem to 2740, which is a gigantic increase in our base damage. Our Golem tooltip life is over 120,000, which means almost 23k base fire damage before any scaling, which is absolutely insane. Not entirely sure about Enhance though. Golem quality is minion damage, and we have spiritual aid, so it can't hurt, and it still is good for other skills in there. Now that I gave a brief rundown of the basics of the build and that you've seen a bit of background, let's get to gem and items. I'll leave my PoB in the description, but keep in mind that it isn't massively optimized version or anything. For items, there are only two mandatory items, which are obviously Maw of Mischief and Obliteration. Getting a Skin of the Lord is also probably best in slot, so you will want that, but you can build up to it, and it's not mandatory at all. Rest of the gear is just rare with life and res as expected, but one standout item is the shield. I don't remember exactly how much this shield might have costed me, but what you will want is a socketed gem of increased reservation efficiency to fit more auras, and a recover of max life on block, which I believe is only possible on a Shaper shield to get both of those stats. Finally, you can try to fit some minion have increased maximum life on your rings, which is a crafted mod, and a +1 to all physical gem on your amulet to further boost your stone golem's life. In this build, we're also making use of several jewels, and we do want at least 3 different specific cluster jewel nodes, a Thread of Hope to save some skill points, and a Timeless Jewel to help out a bit, but the only mandatory one of them is Fan the Flames, which you will basically want as early as possible. For the cluster jewels, as mentioned, we want Fan the Flames, but also Blessed Rebirth, which is perfect as it grants minions some extra life, as well as them not being able to be killed instantly on spawning, which would kill our DPS. Great quality of life for the build, definitely get that. The final is primordial bond, which give us, again, more damage, but it's also the least important one. We are using a medium threat of hope to save ourselves several skill points, and we're a bit stretched thin. And finally, we are also using brutal restraint. We don't absolutely need it, but it certainly gives us a little boost on dexterity, and the one I had also gave us some extra life and damage. Overall, I feel like it was a decent choice as it was filling several of our needs, but it's really a case-by-case basis, so you don't really need it. For generic jewels, go for max life and reservation efficiency, as we're kinda starving for more of both. Now, as to our gems, our Maw of Mischief will simply be Cruelty, Deadly Ailments, Burning Damage, and Unbound Ailments. Now comes the interesting part. In our Skin of the Lord, you will need all Corrupted gems. We want to boost our Stone Golem life as much as possible, and there really aren't that many ways to do it with gems. So it's our Golem gem itself, an Empower, which gets a +2 because of the skin, a minion life, but also an enhance because Stone Golem quality is minion damage, which I think Spiritual Aid might use. But I'm not 100% sure, but anyway. And since it's just 4 gems, we throw in there Molten Shell, which also gets a decent boost to armor due to several extra levels, as well as Convocation, which gets a big cooldown reduction thanks to the quality bonus from Enhance. For our buffs and debuffs, we use Arcanist Bren along with Flammability, Wave of Conviction, and Combustion to make it a one-tap full buff that will last for a little while before needing to be reapplied. Auras. We use several of them. The chunkiest one are Determination and Malevolence. Stake that in a Reservation Efficiency shield, and then we are also using Herald of Purity to get the extra minion to pop. And then it's mostly a quality of life thing, that part, and Tempest Shield for shock immunity. The massive extra 50% spell block tends to Glancing Blow. As the Death Wish get a more multiplier with more minions sacrificed, we use a Summon Skeleton to get more targets, along with Feeding Frenzy for the slide buff it provides, and finally, Reckoning with life gain on it, because why the heck not, and Flame Dash for our movement. Finally, the tree. Well, I won't go into details, you can have a look for yourself, it's nothing super special. Life, minion life, reservation efficiency, ignite / elemental / burning damage, some block, and mention clustered jewels. As for the Ascendancy, we are obviously using Elementalist, as we need Shaper of Flames for the guaranteed Unites, and the Golem Auto Summon from Liege of the Primordial. The other two could be debated. I chose damage with Mastermind of Discord and Heart of Destruction. Obviously this build can be improved, no question about it, but I can tell you that it clears the game as is, and I did a lot of endgame content with it, and even as bad as I am, I was able to make it work. Also, keep in mind that while the boss Ignite DPS is only 1 million according to PoB, as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure it's several times more than that, but I don't have any solid numbers to provide. So for 3.22 Trial of the Ancestors, there's a good chance I'll play this build again, but I have to see like the patch notes to make a final decision. Alright, that's all. See ya!